Hi, I'm Kit Kennedy. I blog about faith, philosophy and life as a modern Christian. Welcome to the last instalment of the Cults and High Demand Group series. Ordinarily, I think I would have gone off into avenues by now and started blogging about different things, but due to the fact that this has been picked up by another blog and due to the fact that it's gotten such a wide readership, I really owe it to you guys to finish it where I said I'd finish it, and that's by talking about a really important question, and that is what happens next if you or someone you love is in a cult or high demand group. I'll also talk about some frequently asked questions. First question. If you or someone you love is in a cult or high demand group, what next? So I'm going to give you three really important considerations there. So the first, is it harmful? So what do I mean? A lot of cults or high demand groups, as we'll call them for the sake of this video, they might be psychology based, they might be self-help based. So though in the beginning this might equate to something really positive for somebody. It might help them with social engagement, it might help them with life skills, it might help them with various different things that they found difficult. But the second factor is that we have to keep in mind is that often when you move closer to the centre of a high demand group, it doesn't stay so healthy, and that's something to be really watchful of if you're a friend or family of somebody who's involved, and it's definitely something to consider if you are the person involved. So here are some questions that you might be able to ask. Is the person more or less able to think freely, think critically? Are they more or less able to make decisions about their life financially, relationally, career-wise, spiritually, without other people making those decisions for them or having a whole lot of input? Is their mental health better or worse? Are they more or less empowered to live a life where they have kind of control of their own decisions? You might want to check off against whether their relationships with friends and family are closer or more distant or even estranged. If you're coming up with some answers you don't like there, then there is a possibility that you might be dealing with someone who is in a cult or high demand group. And if they are, and this is the third thing, consult an expert. There are groups that exist that can help with things like this. In Australia, one of those groups is the Cult Information and Family Support Service. I'll pop the link down below. There are others in other countries. If you can't find them, hey, hit up KIFS or Cult Information and Family Support Service, and they might be able to hook you up with someone who can help in your area. The reason I say consult an expert is because they know this territory and they might be able to make this journey a lot less difficult for you. If you are the person in the cult or high demand group, it might be tempting to go and talk your concerns out with another member of the group, and I would caution you against that because it can actually backfire. Talk to an expert instead. The other thing is, if you're a friend or a family member of a loved one and they're in a group like this, you might just want to shake some sense into them. You might just want to sit them down and talk to them, make them see reason, and that's totally noble, but again, it can backfire. A lot of times a cult or high demand group has a thought reform process, and that might make it very difficult for you to actually get through to the person you love. Not impossible. All I'm saying is consult an expert. And I guess the other thing I need to say is take your time. Rome wasn't built in a day, so you're not going to unbuild it in a day. Take your time, talk to the experts, whether or not you're the person in the group or you're the loved one of the person in the group. You might need time to plan, to gather some allies, gather some resources. One thing that I can tell you from the research that I've looked at over the course of this last blog series is that recovery is definitely possible, and in a lot of cases people go on to live just wonderfully fulfilling lives. In many, many cases people go on to live wonderfully fulfilling lives. It doesn't make this time that you're in right now any less difficult. It doesn't mean it's any less scary, but my goodness, life can get so much better, and that is something that you really should keep in the back of your mind as you go through this process. Okay, so this blog series was written, I guess, in response to something that happened in our personal lives, and that was that my husband put up a status basically saying that he and I had left a particular group a number of years ago, and we didn't really think anyone was interested in our lives. Turns out they were. We were flooded with questions from friends and from strangers and from people who were in groups we knew of and people that we were in groups we had no idea about, and they were from, all over the world. A lot of them were dropping a word that neither my husband nor I had ever dropped in these Facebook statuses that we really didn't expect to have the effect that they did. That word was cult, the C-bomb, as I like to call it. And now I've got a personal beef with that, and that is that the word cult is often thrown around too liberally, and what that means is that groups that aren't cults can be labelled cults. And the flip side of throwing it around too liberally is that we can also throw it around too trivially, and that means that you can discount the real devastating effect that this can have on people's lives. And I thought, you know what, I'm a research writer by trade. When I'm not doing this blog, I did what I do best, and I went and had a look at what information was out there, you know, good, reputable information, and I wanted to make it as accessible and easy to understand as possible. So if you haven't seen all of those articles, go read them, because this last video isn't a tell-all. But yeah, so that's why I wrote this series. I certainly didn't expect the readership that I did. But in wrapping up, I guess we've got a few questions that have popped up along the way that are really important to answer. These questions have maybe been asked of me or my husband, or have come up in conversation. I think they really do matter. So let me consult the Notebook of All Wisdom just so I get them right. The Notebook of All Wisdom, of course, being the iPhone. So the first question: are you still a Christian? Yes, I am. I am definitely still a Christian. Okay, question number 2. Do you still go to church? Yes, I do. I'm actually songwriting tomorrow. Now, over the course of the last month, I've spoken to a lot of people who have left various different groups, and a lot of them aren't in church, a lot of them are in church. Look, it's a different journey for everyone, and depending on your experience, you might find it quite difficult to step back inside those doors of any church, and that's understandable, that's fine. And you know what, if you are wanting to hold on to your faith, then, you know, take your time, do it, whatever it is that you need to do in order to find your faith again. Okay, so question number 3, are you anti-organised religion? This is a really interesting question. You know, in Australia, where I'm from, as you can probably hear from my accent, the dust has barely settled on the Royal Commission into Institutional Abuse, and that showed that there are a lot of people out there who've been hurt by institutional religion, and I completely get that. But no, I'm not anti-institutional religion. And this is a really important thing to note. Not all church is bad just because some church is damaging. What I do think is that it's interesting at the moment we are seeing an increase in independent groups, and I was having a discussion with somebody who was like, isn't that a good thing because the power is taken away from institutional religion? Well, yes, in a way, because individual freedom of expression and individual pursuit of faith matters, but I'm also going to say that it can be a bad thing because most cults revolve around a central personality, and this is where the damage can lie, or the danger can lie rather. So I'm going to link also an article by Psychology Today, I think I got that reference right, which gives you 50 markers of what to look for. All I'm saying here is be informed. Your freedom matters. I also think the role church has is it can keep us encouraged and keep us from going off on bizarre tangents, and can keep us, I guess, you know, with checks and balances around whether our faith is staying true to the Bible. I sometimes think that church gets it wrong, but, you know, sometimes they get it right. So the final question is an interesting one. This was asked of my husband. It's been asked of me over the years of various different kind of stories and scenarios, and I'm absolutely sure that it's a question that gets asked a lot of Christian women. And that question is, why don't you just forgive? Now, I laughed when it was asked of us this month, because it was in reaction to my husband simply giving an indication that we'd left a particular group. That's nothing to do with forgiveness, it's just life, and it's been our life for 2.5 years, you know. We are living in the Me Too era. We are living in the Royal Commission, institutional abuse. We're living in this era where all of the truth's coming out. People don't want to keep their stories secret anymore, and I've noticed this question, why don't you just forgive, is used a lot of the time to keep people quiet. And I want to say 2 things, not because of my story, not because of my blog, but because this is important for other people who might be victims of some form of institutional abuse, or of some form of abuse at all. forgiveness and silence. They're completely different things. Forgiveness to me means I release the perpetrator into God's hands. I say, you know what, God, this is your problem. I'm not going to stay emotionally attached to the damage this person did to me. I'm going to release them into the hands of God for judgment. And for other people, that might be releasing them into the hands of the judiciary for judgment. Either way, it means I can release myself of the emotional attachment. I can be happy. I don't have to be bitter. I move on with my life. What it doesn't mean is rewriting the past. It does not mean that whatever this person did to you was right. It does not mean that you have to be happy about it. It does not mean that you have to be quiet about it, because in a lot of cases, silence means a perpetrator can keep on offending against other victims. Now that matters. Now, if you are looking at this video and you've just been through something so horrible that actually holding them to account would cause you some personal distress or put your mental health at risk, then this is not your time. Don't feel pressure. You look after you because you matter and God cares about you. But if you've been handed this line, just forgive, just forgive. Hey, yeah, forgive. Great. It'll release you from some emotional pressure. But forgiveness and silence do not mean the same thing. I'm going to say this to people who are very concerned with reputation. You know, when the truth comes out, what happens to the reputation of the powerful? You know what? As Christians, we should be more concerned with supporting and protecting the vulnerable than supporting and protecting the powerful. We should be more concerned with doing good than looking good. And we should absolutely be more concerned with compassion. We should always be more concerned with compassion. So look, we're living in an era where the truth's coming out. People aren't living in silence anymore. They're not carrying shame that's not theirs to bear. If people have read this blog and they're not in a cult, they'll read through and go, tick, 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 tick. Okay, that felt great. That felt fine. I'm good. I'm good here. And they might feel bad for people who are in a cult or high demand group. And if you're one of those people, great. I'm really happy for you. I'm one of those people. There are other people who might read it with a sense of desperation. Desperation, go, no, that's not us. That's not us. That's not us. I'd invite you to check yourself there, because happiness can go a lot deeper. Peace can go a lot deeper. So look for that sense of peace, and if you don't have it when you read through these blog articles, then maybe you've got something to look at. Okay, that's it. Thanks for tuning in to the first video I've ever made and was hella nervous about. Yeah, like, follow if you like what you see. I've got a lot of exciting topics coming up over the next month, so thanks for tuning in.